Hi, David.
Hi, Kelly. You're in
How are
Austin?
you?
Yeah, good. I'm doing good. You're
Good.
in Austin?
So we are live now with our virtual reception.
Cool.
So for people starting to tune in with us, we've got David Dornan here in Helper, Utah in his studio. And we've also got a connection here with Meyer Gallery in Santa Fe where his solo exhibition is hanging and installed, open today. So the guys at Meyer are going to kind of show us around and reference the paintings as we talk here with David, who's going to give us an actual studio visit while we talk about his show, which is titled Studio Visit. So David, let's just start by you telling us a little bit about the show and the theme. A lot of the pieces here are what you're calling paintings kind of within paintings. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that direction and kind of what you're communicating through that and just that theme behind the Studio Visit show title.
Yeah, what interests me, I think now, over the years, I've transformed things, gone from one thing to another. And when I was in grad school, I was cocksure of who I was and what I did and and now that I've painted for 45 years, I'm not sure what anything is, what's good and bad sometimes. Mm-hmm. I know that in order to continue painting and be excited after 45 years of what people think of doing the same thing is I've sort of reinvented the process. So the process of painting leads me around. And that process might be, when I look at something like this is from overspray of graffiti paint. I look at some grid like that affects what I see. In other words, my environment, anyone's environment is something that sometimes as artists we don't listen to like we should. We're always looking out, okay, as a young artist, I go out, okay, let's go landscape painting, I'll be Hopper and you be Turner, okay. We go out and we look and try to find a good place, and after about 3 hours, we would find a place to stop. Then we'd pull out our stuff and it's right here. That is, the things that inspire me are so close to me, whether it's a drip of paint or a splash or something like this. What inspires me is this right here just recently. I'll show you in a demonstration shortly. I'm doing a lot of glazing these days. Indirect painting, that is, where the painting, I pull the image up on the computer and I can paint a flower for 2 months or 3 months sometimes and put in 10 minutes one day and then let it go for a few days and then put in 30 minutes. And so what I've got, we'll scan the studio in a minute, but I collect things. And I'm excited about, I sometimes go and find old bottles and dig in dumps a little bit and metal yards. And so I was doing a lot of glazing, and I used to have a place, Spectrum Paint, over in Price, Utah, that makes auto body paints and car, that kind of thing. It's a very high-end kind of technical painting. And so I'm over there getting some stuff, and they think I'm kind of weird. That is, because I do
pulling from the junk and
I don't like his stuff because it's a little bit dirty. And so here's this gentleman walking around and he's got this on. And he's walking around and I said, anything else you need? And I said, yeah, do you sell those aprons? No, we don't. I said, well, I'd like to buy you a new apron, and if you give me that one. What this does, and this exists in a couple paintings, not exactly as it is, but it's a reminder that this is what you don't see when you're in the gallery. As a young artist, I'd go into a gallery and say, I wish art was this simple. Look at this, 22 things, and they're all clean, and they're all, but in reality, there's a lot of dirt and muck and stuff around it, and so we get the antiseptic version. So in something like the banana split painting that you may have seen, or we will see shortly, there's the banana split painting itself that people, oh yeah, we put that up in the kitchen or the living room there, but this is what excites me, all the stuff that's surrounds it.
Mm-hmm. And the gallery's showing us that painting right now with the banana split
Yeah.
surrounded by all your tools, and it almost looks like that same corkboard there in that painting that you're standing.
In some ways, yeah, it is. The other one I was going to show you, this little thing, is this little board right here. I've had this and I'll have it for the rest of my life. A guy who was an art student and had an art painting business was painting in Palm Desert. I got to know him in conversation, and one day he said, "I've got something for you." And I said, "Oh, yeah." Brings this in and gives this to me. "You can have it." I said, "What is it?" And what it is he goes to the paint supply store and they mix up the colors, and they have index cards in this clipboard. And so they'll take the index card and go like that, and then they dry it. And this clipboard, and then pretty soon he said, "What do you do with those clipboards?" "Oh, we throw them away." "I'll bring you some new ones if you just let me have those." But of course, look at the beauty of what this is, the pentamente, the history of the surface. You know, like it's like, here's the 1997 living rooms in Palm Desert, California. Colors, the theme, you know. So it would be interesting. I'm fascinated by how this thing exists. I have never painted this thing exactly. That is, I'm not going to get up there and say, "Okay, this is interesting in and of itself," but rather the mood of it is.
And maybe the history of that object having more of a story. And
as artists, we in some ways, you know, Degas said we paint falsely and add the accent of nature. And I think that's very true. That is, we paint from, you know, we're saying that, okay, it kind of feels like this, so I'm going to kind of act like this when I paint it. And then I'll add the accent of nature, that is the science of it. And that's what I'm fascinated by. So at what point do we, I'm going to just do something here very quickly, that white canvas. I'm going to scan the studio here real quick.
yeah.
Everybody can see where I'm standing. I'm in Helper, Utah. We have a building here that, and I am in my studio. I have, momentarily, I'll have a restaurant fan because I do a lot of spraying. And so what we're going to do, I'm just going to turn around in the gallery, in my studio, so you can see what is in my studio.
Which is surprisingly a lot more orderly than what you would think after seeing your paintings.
Yeah, but thankful to CJ Hales, my assistant. He'll be coming in the shot pretty soon. That's CJ. He comes in and helps me with painting. I can walk out of the door and come back into the studio. We'll go back around here. And you can see up there are what I call blanks. Oftentimes I'll just pull a painting down. When I'm not in the mood for painting, I pull a painting down and I just attack something. You know, I'll never attack a beautiful painting, but sometimes it's easy to take a bad color and put on a painting that you don't care for and
give it a little new life.
Make a positive. So the act of getting an artist started is what I find is fascinating, is the most interesting thing, because, okay, what should I do today? Okay, let's see. Well, I better go get some art supplies. I need some new brushes. That's it. Okay, cool. It's so easy. You know, when you go to your house, the lawn needs mowed. Okay, I'll mow the lawn. When you mow the lawn, you know when you're completed. But painting is this kind of ethereal, anthropomorphic thing that dodges and dances around. So what I constantly do is find things that upset the apple cart. An example, let's see that white canvas there, CJ. So some of you out there,
those old objects that you're resurrecting there.
Some I know. I'm just going to very quickly go through this process. As it dries, I'll also talk about the other paintings. But if we look at an example of the process, is I have an unusual painting in this show. It's different for me. It's called Appliance World. And when I was young, my mom decorated cakes and made wedding cakes for people. And our kitchen would be a complete mess. Now, I haven't made this connection until recently. But then I ran across a friend of mine, Jeff Sherman had inherited a bunch of, cool antiques, and I was at his house, and he said, "Oh, here, you want to paint that?" I said, "Sure." And so get this catalog. It's got this woman on the front of the catalog, in that drawer right there, and in the front of it is this is what my mom grew up with. So as I started looking at this catalog, those images on the background of that are an absolute cliche.
Oh yeah, there's your source, inspiration.
Mix master. Then there's a whole bunch of images, very tiny, and she's there, and she's the cake, and then I put a best of show award in there, and there's and I chose a few images out of that.
And in the painting, the part of the painting that was kind of inspired by the back there almost looks like that green portion in the right. I think the gallery's showing us.
Sort of era wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
But your world is going to be complete with these images. There are numerous images I edited out of it, but it's almost as if there was this wallpaper you can see in the painting and this mixer. I knew my Sunbeam mix, that was maybe the only option people had. But my mom would then clean everything up, and then sometimes I went with her where she would deliver the cake. And now she was delivering the final painting to the people who were getting married. But it was really a mess inside the house. And I remember sitting watching my mom, and she would make flowers, beautiful flowers. And I was fascinated by that repetition that she did. And I said, "Mom," after I was in art school, I said, "Mom, you should take a ceramics class, because you could make a wedding out of ceramics. They have lusters and glazes and stuff. That would be fascinating." So 8 months pass. I'm in graduate school in Arizona. I come back home, and she goes, "I took a ceramics class." And I said, "Great, what did you do?" She goes, "Oh, it's in the bathroom. It's a frog soap dish."
Not what you were expecting.
A soap sitting in it. It was a mouth, and it was all pre-glazed. You glazed it green because you wouldn't glaze a frog fluorescent. And there was she was conforming in that. But what she didn't see was the poetry in what she did. And a lot of people don't see the poetry in what they do in a day-to-day basis, on a day-to-day basis. But that's where I draw my inspiration from. I'm around this stuff. I find things and tools that just make marks. Now this I found the other day at Walmart. I'm going to do something with it just very quickly. But you can see it's made for icing, so you roll it into icing. But I can put this on a surface. So I'm going to take I'm going to place a dark out here. And this is graffiti paint. Now, most people will say, graffiti, yeah, isn't that something that vandals do? Well, it's not anymore. It's on the sides of beautiful buildings. Oh, wow, that graffiti is getting a pentimenta to it. And so now there's this graffiti paint, and it dries very quickly. If I put that in oil paint, now I could go have lunch and put it in the sun and let it dry. But in a few minutes, this is going to be dry. Now I'm going to try it, and you're seeing it here first. I'm going to spray this on here, just white, really thick, and then I'm going to roll this through it. Now it slipped on me. Fascinating. I didn't know that would happen. But look at that pattern. Wow, that pattern is interesting. We'll let that dry for a moment while we talk. Then I'm going to make a painting. Now, when I start
kind of ordinary objects within your process, kind of whatever you have on hand.
Yeah.
Right? So bottles and
so
jars and cans, spinach cans
that I will paint from. Okay, so here's that little cherry. Here's the little jar that held cherries. The cherries.
You have a honey jar in there as well. I see. Is that a honey jar back there that shows up in a lot of the honey bottle back behind it?
Yeah, I painted it white, and so then I could turn this thing into a patterned honey bear with a honey bear stencil. Mm-hmm. Now, let me evolve around what I'm doing. Years ago, as an artist, saw someone, they would load paint onto their brush, and I became a teacher of this, that you have a form right here, and you see you know, you see painting people come up and go, and then they get next to that object and they're real careful. So if you shield that object off, you can then paint over that edge and you can make a shield. So let's just cut this thing down a little bit with the shield.
So do you have a vision of what that is becoming, or are you experimenting with texture and color and shape?
I'm going to make it something in a moment.
Yeah.
But let's just, it's sort of like serendipitous in nature. Let's see.
Right.
Let's see if I take this and I then found that if I cut it in a certain shape, I can chop into it. Let's just chop into this edge and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now.
Oh, I see. I see what it's
looking like some kind of Anasazi pot. I mean, what the heck is that? Literally, it's totally unplanned. But you'll see this dry, and then I'll go into it with what I will show you as glazes. I thought about teaching, you know, I told my wife, I'm as interested in painting now as I was getting tired 25, 30 years, 20 years ago. You know, I was like, okay, you again. Okay, another piece of wallpaper. Painting wasn't exciting. When I started painting, it was like, walk in the art building and go, I love the smell of this varnish. I was so excited. And they said, build a stretcher bar. Build a stretcher bar, wonderful, wonderful. And I went home and I measured 8 and 9 times and I built and stretched it. Then I started and said, okay, now what do you do with the paint? Well, then you do a drawing of this. And it was an apple and an old rusty pot and something else. And so I did it and I painted it as accurately as I could. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. Then the next painting you're now doing, and it's like, okay, this painting is not as good as my first one. And the next one is, well, this is better than the other two. And pretty soon, but after thousands and thousands of paintings, there's very few differences between paintings.
right.
And in reality, spiritually, there's not much difference between any of the paintings in the show. That is, there are big paintings in which there's a moment of tiny placement. And a little tiny brush, small manipulation. And then there's the times when you have to, upset the apple cart, so to speak. So I'm going to place a shield on here. And
I was wondering when you were going to start flinging paint, because it seems like you can see that in your work.
yeah,
I was curious if that is a kind of a calculated effort, or if it really is just a fling of paint. It looks like it really is a fling of paint.
yeah, so I'll let things come forward and things move back. Now, as I worked, I started making specialized stencils. That is a shape that I liked, that I repeated a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've got here is a base. This is a positive and negative of a base. Now I'm going to paint this. I need let me have a larger one. I have around 8,000 stencils in here. Some of them I've just completely abandoned. There's the same thing, larger.
Now these are things that you've created over time. Some of these that you've used a long time ago are recurring paintings.
I've designed this shape, and so if I come in here and I say, okay, I want this to be, actually I'm going to make this a short shape. Okay, so I come in and say, all right, I want that to be shorter. I don't know what the heck that is in the background. But now I'll take this, I use a lot of carburetor cleaner. Spray acetone is basically what it is. And this is what you clean your carburetor when they had air aspirated carburetors. But now they must be crazy. The Walmart must go, how come they're selling so much carburetor cleaner in Carbon County? And I'll go in, CJ went in and got 100 cans once. Like 100 cans, how many carburetors can you clean? But a lot of times art is a funny thing. I did a mural for the state of Utah many years ago that's in their collection. And I went to a paint store one Sunday because I ran out of white. And I was a 11 by 16 foot mural, and I had a broomstick and I had 3 4-inch brushes together, and so I painted with these brushes. So I went to I got 4 brushes, and I needed some titanium white. Well, they had a little artist display over there. It was Standard Brands is the name of it. And I went over there and I got all their white, which was, I think, 11 tubes. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna use 11 big tubes of oil paint and these 4-inch brushes. And I'm standing in the checkout line, and there's a woman who's watching things and then another woman who's checking out. She looks in, she goes, oh, sir, that paint is for artists. She thought I was painting my living room with it. I was mistaken. I said, oh, good. But I started, I'm only halfway across the ceiling and I ran out. So, now let's take another color here let's see what's going on.
So this is a process that you go through for a lot of your still life pieces, like the gallery's showing us one now of one of your, with the vases and the jars, and
yeah.
This is kind of where that begins.
Yes, I do stuff until something doesn't irritate me too much. Mm-hmm. And then I reinforce it. I'll find something that's like all of a sudden, oh, that starts to look like this, or that starts to look like that. Now, if I
So David, you're not typically looking at an actual prop or still life setup. This is all just kind of working with shape and pattern and abstract thinking.
Theory. That is, I understand exactly what light does. I understand exactly what form does. I understand all that logical stuff that I can tell other people about. But what I try to do is present something that makes me act on what's there. Mm-hmm. It rarely, nothing ever turns out right the first time, but all of a sudden you see, like, wow, there's parallels here. Something going on. I'll have CJ put this in the parabolic heater, and then I'll complete it in a minute. At least complete it up to the point I can. Now, and if you want to walk around the gallery, you can. The flowers, I put flowers in my paintings, but they're all ones that I grow. Mm-hmm. Or
you're talking about how nature is kind of the greatest artist, that you do your best to mimic that.
Collecting it is the most important part, It's like wandering through a junkyard, and as an artist, I would tell students to go through, walk down a highway. I want you to go out and walk, be careful, don't get in traffic. But walk down a highway, and I want you to find an object. And keep walking until you find 2 objects, and then toss 1 away. Then get 3 and toss 1 away. Then 4 and toss another 1 away. And at the end of that walk, you have the residue of how you felt in that walk. That is where art comes from. That's where poetry comes from. It's not built into the Eiffel Tower or the Grand Teton Mountains. We all recognize that some things are subjects that are so recognizable that everyone can say, put it on their wall and say, oh, that's a wonderful painting. That's the Grand Tetons, isn't it? Yeah, that's the Grand Tetons. Good. And they never see it again. Right. It sits back there, and and what I'm fascinated just these days, I've been watching all these videos like this, where I'm watching whether it's Stephen Colbert or the news, and 4 or 5 people are talking, and one person's image is over here on the right, and there's blank squares on their face, and their face is digitalizing. And I stop the screen, and I look at that face digitalized, and I thought, wow, Picasso would love to see that. Things now that are moving into our psyche that we that we never have. And being aware of what's going on today, I think, for me, is critical, but only in a visual sense. Light is universal and it stays the same. The sun comes up, it rains. It's like those are universal principles in painting. That is, I tend not to be political in my painting, because it's someone once said, if an issue is around, like there's going to be some paintings about what's going on with COVID, with very passionate things coming out of artists, and we can all relate to them right now. Now, who as an artist will make something that transcends and 200 years from now says the despair is what is encapsulate. How do we feel about the scream, the painting, the scream? It's on t-shirts and bikinis and beach balls. And it's like when Edvard Munch painted that, there was nothing like what really happened.
Right.
It's not, oh, there's the scream. I think we'll get one of those. Oh, and a Monet. I love the water lilies. Have you seen the water lilies? Yes. We went to Giverny, I think it was, and we got postcards. We got water lilies. So in a way, I know where the spirit of Monet was in painting, painting in the backyard. But some of us now have backyards that have tough sheds in them. That's what we should paint.
Right.
Our next door neighbor, the light is still a beautiful unifying thing. So let me set this up here now.
Yeah, and what I love about your paintings and these style that you're doing in the show too, of these paintings in paintings, and you're kind of showing that final product, like, that final image of like Monet's water lilies or whatever that final clean piece is. And then also showing kind of what you're referencing and talking about now is the tough shed in the yard and everything, all that periphery that you've spoken
Right.
of, the craziness and all the outside influence that's kind of on the edges of that.
Yeah, in fact, I made a wonderful trompe-l'oeil, which means fool the eye painting of this on the wall, and maybe a bird feather under here, and they'd say, oh, he's another William Harnett. And everybody go, wow, how long did that take? Wow, that looks just like a photograph.
Right.
And none of that, I don't connect to it. It's like, it's the process is so important. Now, here's a painting that is still embryonic in nature. This painting is in the show right here.
Oh.
So now I've got
maybe will show us that on their end.
And
yeah,
that's the
up there.
You see that in my show. And now I'm bringing in these little denizens from the studio, the things as if, there's a painting of things and here's the things that painted up, but they're all the same thing. Now, when I paint now, bring the transparency glazes over more. So now when I paint, I'm going to show you this, and for the artists out there, I'd like to teach this process sometime, but what I'm afraid of is people don't have the ventilation that I have. You'll hear me turn my fan on for a second, but bring that whole roller over here. Bring me this. So
it's a cool illusion that looking at this painting in your studio and what the gallery is showing us of that final image, I like that perspective plays in the show too, with relationships between paintings, which is an interesting illusion for the viewer too.
Right. So now that other painting is drying, and this one is now in the stage of starting with oil. I put a little bit of oil on here, and now I need to, energize it. So how do I do that? How do I make it feel more like what's around me? So I got these cans. What we do is I buy blanks, and they're just propellant. And then we have a machine that I mix up a color and we put it in here, and now I have a can of spray paint. Well, this spray paint is specialized. Artists use Damar varnish, and then they thin it with turpentine to make retouch varnish. Well, this is tinted retouch varnish. I call this one rose dust. It's just a tint of red. So I think you'll be able to see that. We're going to move up. Yeah, CJ's going to move this up.
So these pigments in your paintings, a lot of them are something that you create yourself in the studio.
That's everything. It's most all invented. There are references to real things. Obviously, I don't, you know, make a Tabasco can. Now, this is pretty much white paint right now, but I have this red, and if I mix this red color with white paint, you'd only be looking at the surface of that color. That would be in direct painting. But when you can look through this red and see the white, what happens is the surface captures the light. So in this case, if I want to say, all right, I want this side of the painting, the sun is coming in here and is warm. See how that's tinting that into a red range. I'm going to flip this on for a second just so I can exhaust the fan out here. Now it's going to get more dramatic. Here's that same color, a little more dense. So if I say, well, I want slightly more dense, you can see how it's starting to change that.
Get a very subtle shift in tone.
Yes. It's taking everything and it's unifying it into the same color of light. That is, so I kind of paint an object by painting its local color and then start putting its variation through. Mm-hmm. This one is a mixture. I call it Rembrandt light. And it's about the value of Rembrandt glazing. See how this starts to push things down. Give me a couple dense ones. Now I'm just kind of considering the colors of the entire painting. Okay, so now if there was a red wall over here, I could paint some red in there, and everything on that side, that would look more real over here. Here's into orange, orange.
And so David, just as you're working there, that piece that we saw you working on just a few minutes ago, is that kind of step one for something like this too? Yeah. How you get those shapes?
It's very different. Like I say, I'm trying to knock myself off balance. Mm-hmm. So now you can see, I'm loving what gravity's doing. So if I wipe this off, start seeing warm and cools taking place.
Oh, wow.
Into white. Okay, now, art schools are horrible in that the teachers often want to talk about esoteric stuff. They don't want to say, here's how you do this little thing. Because I remember when my art teacher, he was an abstract painter, and he showed us that first painting I did with the apple I was so proud of. And then I saw one of his paintings, and I thought, wow, is this where I'm headed? I was happy that I was going somewhere, right? And so he didn't really practice the act of painting. And it was more about the theory. So he didn't really do what I was asking. Now, I heard for years, never use black. Never glaze with white. Throw all that out the window so far. It's like I have a white glaze here, and it's called white dust. Give me the square sheet. So I put a shield up here. And I say, okay, I want this wall to be lighter. Lifting that up.
Oh, and that's really giving a lot of depth too. It's that painting is popping off the wall a little bit more now.
I've gotten to the point where I can change a painting in 20 or 30 minutes.
Right.
Now I've got this thin glaze of white, and I wanted to, like, let's say, I wanted to come across that bottom there.
Ah.
Now it's coming on there, and serendipitous things are happening. You know, it's like, but look how beautiful that is.
I like you're a risky artist. I feel like throwing paint on a painting can be a little bit of a scary thing, right?
Oh, it's you know what's fun is that like last year during the Helper Arts Festival, which we're not having this year, a young kid was in the audience, and I grabbed him and I said, "You want to make a collaboration?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Go over there and get a stencil." So he got to choose one of those stencils, and he came over and he chose one. I said, "Okay, we'll go. How about this size?" Okay. He was helping me make decisions. And at the end, I said, "Okay, now we both have to sign it." And I gave him the painting. It's a little painting about this size of it. You know, and those experiences are what I experienced with my grandmother and my mom when they made wedding cakes and watched them. And I'm only starting to realize the value and the importance of that now. So now this has started to dry. That retouch, is okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get rid of stuff that's not on the ladder. Shield the ladder off, wipe that away. Shield that off, wipe that away. So all of a sudden, I'm building the history of this up. Now this one has to have a shadow there.
It's interesting because the shapes in your paintings look very organic, you know, but in seeing your process, seeing these very kind of lines and, you know, almost meticulous measures that you're taking to create these spontaneous shapes is really interesting.
What I have to do when I make a lot of changes in the painting that make me act. That is, I'm not going to take a day to paint this wall. It used to take me a day. Now I've tried to figure out how can I do this in a different way. And if you just look at now this is untinted retouch varnish. And if I come across here and say, this has had hundreds of paintings on it. This is kind of like this thing. So now my painting sits there, and here's all the rest of the stuff, the residue.
Yeah.
So I have to I want this stuff on the floor, so I'll make that sort of artificially. I'm not going to say, okay, there's a little piece of lint. Now I'd fall asleep. I'm going to say, all right, here I need something that's going to come from above, from an old painting. Then I'll let them soften the surface. So you can see that starting to, in that center part, you can see those lines starting there. A little more rose dust. Bring me this set of stuff here.
And David, do you, right now, or is this stage just a spraying stage? Are you, at some point, do you use, you know, brushes, or is that kind of more of the last step, the brush and a knife?
Well, a lot of times I'll use brushes at the beginning. You'll see me use the brush in a minute. But, okay, so now, let me show you what's going on here.
Yeah.
Up just a little bit, CJ. You're going to see one of my baking trays that has these objects for this particular type of painting in it.
Okay.
More so you can see, yeah. All right, so now, well, I've got these, a lot of different sizes. So now I say, well, here, this happens to be that one. Okay, so if I don't like that there, I'll say, gosh, I want it to be more here to the left. Not on? Yes. Okay. Now I'll say, okay. I'll look at this. When I look in the mirror for my composition, let's spin this around. Okay, tip it up. Behind me, you can see a mirror.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So I make all my decisions in the mirror, and I paint looking at the surface. But if I'm deciding where something's going, I'll put this up here, and I'll move it around. Say, yeah, I think I want it in this direction. Because in reality, yes, that's a squeeze bottle, but it's also a thing that points at something.
Mm-hmm.
The energy that it has. So if I say, okay, here's this and there's that, I'd rather have this sitting down on this ladder right in here. But if it's moving forward in space by 20%, I need another size up. So now, here's the same thing larger. So with knowledge of perspective, I can say, all right, I want this to sit here. So
that mirror is really kind of giving you a perspective so that you can make decisions as far as the composition as a whole.
Yeah. It gives me a ton of freedom. It's not like I'm going to paint something in and go, oh boy, better not move that. That took me a day. And so that is, sometimes our paintings kick us out.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to where I don't let my painting kick me out. And every once in a while, something's just not, and I'll say, okay, let's just put something in here. Put something in like this. Over. I have a lotion bottle or a little small jar.
So you can repurpose those stencils to create different shapes.
Combinations of things.
Mm-hmm.
I know from light theory where the highlight hits. So I've got something there. Now, it doesn't fit there. But should I get rid of it? I don't know. I'm going to tone it down. Let it be almost like it's a tattoo on the surface of my wall. Much in the way that it's this. Like that
Right.
start looking like a can. So what happens is, at least in my painting now, is I don't wait around to build the painting. I build it falsely so that I can get to the decision making. You know, there's no longer, okay, it's not a slow process or I would fall asleep.
Right. You can't overthink and overcalculate your steps.
And, you know, that was what I taught at the University of Utah for 17 years, and I'll shut my fan off. And as a teacher, it was wonderful because you'd have these students who would have an awkward, slightly ill proportion, but they had the values and everything laid in, and you could walk around and you could be this hero. So I was always going out into the classroom and say, well, you know, here we go. Let me place a few highlights here and change this line there, and they'd be, you know, I'd be revered. Oh, I felt good. And I go to the next class. This is so great. Then I'd walk into my studio and I'd go, how come it's not easier in here? Because I'm letting the painting lead me, and the decisions that are happening, they've got me a little bit like this, and I'm tugging back. And that's where that battle, that interesting fight comes, and we sort of come to an agreement, the painting and me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a lot of people come to my house and say, well, I don't see many of your paintings. There's one painting of a chocolate I gave my wife, Mary Lou, the hang on the wall. But because I would want to take them off the wall and rework them in my current state of mind. And that's always transitory, but that's the life, that's the growth. And I'm so glad that my paintings have been well received by, you know, I see different people will have a painting and I might never meet him. I know that somehow it's changing a life. I had a woman come up to me and she said, "Are you Dave Dornan?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, I have to give you a hug. I have one of your sunflowers." And I look at it every morning when I drink my coffee. And that's where my painting sits with people, is I want people to take a moment and realize that the ordinary is special. That extraordinary is rubber stamping, cha-ching, cha-ching, But the interesting thing about these types of paintings is, is I can put anything in that square I want.
Right.
So now in my head, and you'll see these at some point, imagine aspen trees. I would never paint aspen trees. There's too many aspen tree paintings in the world, and they're all, it's just like, There's a few good ones. Aspen trees, when you go to a cabin in Telluride, and there's aspen trees, and you go next door, and they've got aspen trees.
Not as many Tabasco bottles and spinach cans as I'd like to see.
So now I can paint aspen trees in here. Then I can have the residue of the artist, and I think I can imagine like a chunk, an aspen tree chunk right here, a piece of bark you used to study from, and a chainsaw down here, and then, something, the stuff that you do to understand more about an aspen tree. But this allows me to paint this. I did a painting last year. It's now, in the Zions Bank collection in Salt Lake City, but I painted a view of the balance rocket in Helper. Now in Helper, Utah, there's one place that everybody wants to get a picture, or two. One of them's the balance rock, and one of them's Big John. And Big John, Big John is a fiberglass man that's a lumberjack. And it's like, let's get a shot of Big John. And there's the thing in Helper, which documents Helper. And I could never get myself to rubber stamp the beauty of that. But yet all of a sudden, it gave an excuse for me to do that in a painting. So I don't know what is going to happen in here in the next couple of years. Next year, it's a local artist here in Helper, Ben Steele, was tearing a window out of his building, and I stopped and I started looking at the bricks, and I said, so I got these bricks. Now they're sitting in there and they're cooking in my mind. CJ went to grab one. But I'm of the ilk that I want to say, if you can get a person to see the beauty in a broken brick, that's a real challenge. And it's because I see that beauty and I feel it. Look at this thing here. That's just.
Now, what are you drawn to about that? What is it that you see there?
Oh.
Get closer up here so you can see the texture.
Yeah, you can see the texture of this brick.
Yeah.
I went and picked through them, and it's insignificant. This brick is going to get dumped in the dump yard and be gone. But for some, it gives me a sense of being able to stop time and say, okay, this brick is now recorded forever. I won't be the first artist who's ever painted bricks. But that's what leads me. I would tell people my nightmare would be to be stuck on a Walt Disney cruise ship for 2 weeks. I just absolutely would go nuts because everything is finished and clean, and there's Mickey Mouse, and everybody's happy, and everybody's dancing, and I would just be, boy.
See the grit.
Yeah, there would be nothing to grab. There's a few fascinating things that happened in the paintings in this show. As I see them scan around, there's a rose. I mean, it's amazing to me. You sit and you struggle to get the iridescence of a rose and the flower and the gesture, and then you walk out in the garden and there's thousands of them. You pick one and you say, I'm going to stop time here somehow, and that's what's important to me. So that's a rose, and that's a choice of jars that I liked. I've designed that jar for that particular rose, though I never set it up. So once in a while, once in a while, I'd just come in and I'd get some water and stick it into a jar and then put a pencil in it so I could see how much deflection there was of light, but adding accent of nature because it because it flipped around. There's another painting that should be close to this one somewhere. It's just out. It's out on the North 40 of our property. We have 3/4 of an acre. But yeah, that iris, it's just like, that is, it's so beautiful. That little jar, I have that little jar, and I found that jar, and I picked that iris, and I came down to the studio, and I started going crazy with it. So as I started it, you can see in the surface of that painting, those drips and things. So I'll walk up and spray paint that. And what's amazing is when you look at a flower, gravity affects a flower.
Right.
And drips on a jar are affected in the same way. And it's as ordinary of anything on this planet, a flower just put into a vase, but it signifies something interesting. That is, we go out into the yard and there's thousands of flowers, and we go and pick one out and bring it in, and how'd you pick and set it into a jar, and all of a sudden you feel like you control nature. The English castles, you go to the English castle, it would be all refined, and then there'd be a moat around it, and then it would be more grasslands and cows, and then as you got further and further and further away, it became the wild. So the sophisticated people had their lawns mowed, and the hermits, there would be an old shack they would have, and the hermit could be seen darting around amongst by the cultural, oh, honey, look, there's a hermit. And, and there was Rembrandt painting the hermits and people with warts on their noses and the romanticists, as opposed to idealism,
Right.
Some of these things are more ideal, and I have an ideal sensibility. Like, this is as ideal of a flower as I can make on that particular day, or turn that into, and it has a unique quality to it, and it's idealized, and yet it's romanticized also, because it's like, yeah, not all the glass is clean,
Right.
And there's Tabasco, and I just love Tabasco. I like this. I like this idea that an artist is in such a passion to paint, they're going to go, oh wow, what do I have that'll fling paint? I got to store it in a Tabasco jar, and then you fling it out of a Tabasco jar, and it goes in a certain way.
Right.
And if I had my way, I kind of like to think of myself knowing about the viscosity of paint, like Dexter knows about the viscosity of blood. That you add a little more liquid, a little more of this, and it splashes in a slightly different way. And what happens if you put two things together that don't mix and match? I get a lot of my art supplies from odd places, Home Depot. If you're in a rut as an artist, buy art supplies from some place that you can't find any art supplies. And all of a sudden, blue shoe polish will come up, and then you have to work on top of butcher paper. And
Right.
what you do at that moment it'll change the way you think.
And that viscosity of paint that you were talking about is also kind of what you said you see in the chocolate syrup in that ice cream. It kind of has similar qualities. So how did you kind of jump to the dessert as your subject?
Well, curious, the cherries, I've visited cherries. I revisit things a lot, and I run across different things that remind me of, these, if I find something that's fascinating, and a lot of times I'll wonder if I can paint it, and that'll be my motivation for seeing how do you get the texture of ice cream? It's not an easy thing to do. You can sit back and paint a store that sells ice cream, but to actually get in there and physically make the ice cream. So I'll make a texture of ice cream, build up the pentamente, and what is the texture of ice cream, so that you can drag your brush across and it scumbles across and catches the light on the ice cream. So in a way, I'm building an ice cream cone, making a painting of, instead of making a painting of what it looks like. I'll bring me the spray paint. Now, I don't know what our time frame is. I can chat for hours sometimes, but I just want to.
We're getting close to, we're about at 6 o'clock here. So if there's anything else you want to show us with your painting process or in your studio, we can do that before we end
Let me
here.
get this back out. Now, look at that. I mean, look at that. That could be an ice cream sandwich. That could. Yeah. So I have dozens of these blanks. It's still kind of warm, but look how beautiful that edge became. Now let me get out some stencil. All right. So let's just identify. Let's just get back here to the original thing here. Say, all right. Let's just define the negative space. Okay, then this surface is going to put a little blue down here to reflect in that surface. Yeah, now I'm going to spray it. So now I'm spray this momentarily with. Okay, in this thing, I know a lot of artists use liquid. This is spray liquid.
No, that's transparent black.
Oh, that's the, oh, okay.
This is why you have CJ around, right? Studio assistants are important.
Here we go. This, it fooled me because this are the only cans that have diagonal stripes, you know. I always thought it was funny, you know, Mondrian and Van Doesburg got everybody worked up when they split up because one said you can't do a diagonal, you got to do verticals and horizontals. So anyway, I'm going to put this on here and I'll hit it with the white glaze. And touch some highlights in here.
You make it look very intuitive when you make those marks.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. And so now I'm going to, let me take this, let's just tint it into orange light.
Oh, wow.
And then we will finish with a little bit of, let me put I use a lot of old playing cards, but let's just put a little bit of stuff here. Oh yeah. So this acetone is going down and digging into all those layers. Oh.
Blending in a lot of interesting ways.
Yeah. So there's the original white. Do you see that I did?
Yep, and that texture underneath there.
Yeah. And so this is what, so I come into the studio and I have dozens of blanks and I walk up and say, hey, how about this? This gets the juices flowing, and that's kind of all I'm looking for. And I'm always surprised, and I'm happy that at my retirement age, I'm as excited about painting as I ever have been. And
that's great news.
I thank everybody for watching this and coming in, whoever joined in this.
Yeah.
You know, when will this thing happen? Ooh, it's just cooking over there.
Well, we'll be excited to see what that painting looks like when it's complete.
I'll put it away, and then I'll bring it back out, and all of a sudden I'll say, oh, yeah, this is, yeah, you know. So.
Well, it's been really fun talking with you, David. I think the gallery's doing one more scan here of all your work and the show, and that studio visit exhibition will be up through, what is the date? June 11th. It's going to be up at the gallery, and the gallery's open. They're normal hours now, so I hope everybody comes in and sees the show in person. And this has been really fun, seeing a little bit behind the process and doing a studio visit about your studio paintings. So
yeah, well, it's a new thing for me, and it's been fun, and you know, I might not have to leave Carbon County again.
Well, we hope not. We hope that you make it to Santa Fe sometime this year. Well, thanks, David, and we'll talk with you soon.
All righty. Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.